There is a phase of awakening that most people never talk about because it doesn't look powerful, it doesn't feel inspiring, and it doesn't earn applause. It feels like walking alone while the world keeps moving without you. After the point of no return, life doesn't suddenly become clear. It becomes quiet. Too quiet. The noise fades first. Opinions, expectations, external pressure. They slowly lose their grip, not because they disappear, but because they no longer reach you. And in that silence, something uncomfortable happens. You realize how much of your life was shaped by voices that were never yours. He noticed it in small moments, when he achieved something and didn't feel the urge to share it, when he struggled and didn't feel the need to explain, when praise felt unnecessary and criticism felt irrelevant. That scared him because most people measure progress by reaction. Approval means success. Rejection means failure. But now, neither mattered the same way. And when external feedback loses power, you are left with only one judge, yourself. That is when the solitary path begins. Not dramatic solitude, not isolation by force, but chosen distance. He stopped forcing connections that no longer felt honest, stopped pretending interest to maintain familiarity, stopped shrinking his thoughts to keep others comfortable. That decision wasn't brave, it was exhausting. Because loneliness is easier when you blame others. Chosen solitude offers no excuses. He couldn't say, "They abandoned me." He had to say, "I chose alignment over belonging." And that truth was heavy. Some days the silence felt empowering. Other days it felt suffocating. Because humans are not built to walk alone for long periods. But awakening often requires exactly that. A season without validation, without witnesses, without reassurance, a season where growth happens without confirmation. He started questioning everything, not in panic, in clarity. Why do I want this? Is this mine or inherited? Would I still choose this if no one ever noticed? Those questions stripped ambition down to its bones. Many goals didn't survive that process. They were built on comparison, on proving something, on being seen. Those collapsed quietly, and what remained was simpler but heavier. Responsibility toward self. No performance, no image, no audience, just standards. He understood why so many people abandon this phase, because the solitary path offers no dopamine, no immediate reward, no social confirmation. Progress here feels invisible. Days pass with no clear milestones, just repetition, discipline, inner resistance, and doubt. So much doubt, not loud doubt, quiet doubt. The kind that asks at night, "Is this worth it? Am I missing out? Did I isolate myself unnecessarily?" Those questions didn't attack him. They tested him, because the solitary path is not about strength, it's about endurance. Can you continue without praise? Can you stay honest when no one is watching? Can you move forward without knowing if anyone will ever understand? He realized something unsettling. Most people don't fear failure, they fear irrelevance. Being unseen feels worse than being unsuccessful, and the solitary path demands invisibility, at least for a while. He had moments where he wanted to explain himself, to justify his choices, to clarify his silence, to be understood. But he stopped, because explanation is often a hidden request for permission, and permission was no longer part of his life. This path wasn't about rebellion, it was about independence, mental independence, emotional independence, moral independence, and those come with loneliness as a tax. He paid that tax daily, by waking up with no excitement, by working without validation, by improving without witnesses. And slowly, something shifted. The loneliness stopped feeling empty. It started feeling focused. The silence stopped feeling heavy. It started feeling clear. He wasn't disconnected. He was undistracted. That distinction changed everything. The solitary path wasn't punishment. It was preparation, a stripping away of noise before something solid could be built. He didn't know what that something was yet, but he knew this. If he quit now, he would return to comfort, not fulfillment. And comfort had already shown him where it leads. So he stayed, walking quietly, without urgency, without explanation, not chasing meaning, becoming capable of holding it. The solitary path doesn't test strength first, it tests patience. Because silence has a way of magnifying everything you've avoided. Without noise, memories grow louder, regrets resurface, unfinished thoughts demand attention. He noticed this especially at night, when the day ended and there was nothing left to distract him. No messages, no obligations, no performance, just awareness, and awareness can be ruthless. It brings back moments you thought were buried, decisions you rushed, opportunities you ignored, words you never said, not to torture you, to confront you, because the solitary path forces honesty before progress. He realized that distraction was never the problem, avoidance was. Now that avoidance was gone, he had to sit with himself fully. That required a different kind of discipline, not the discipline of action, the discipline of restraint, resisting the urge to escape, resisting the urge to explain, resisting the urge to be understood. Silence became his training ground. He stopped filling every gap with noise or activity. He allowed boredom, allowed discomfort, allowed stillness, and in that stillness, patterns became clear. He saw how often he reacted emotionally, how quickly he sought reassurance, how deeply he feared judgment. Those realizations were not flattering, but they were freeing, because once a weakness is named, it loses some of its power. He understood something important. Most people don't lack discipline. They lack tolerance for discomfort. The moment discomfort appears, they numb it. Scroll, consume, distract. But growth lives exactly where discomfort begins. So he stayed there, not heroically, reluctantly, day after day. The solitary path doesn't reward effort immediately. There were weeks where nothing seemed to change, no breakthrough, no clarity, no emotional release, just repetition. Wake up, do the work, stay silent, go to sleep. That monotony tested him more than chaos ever did, because chaos gives you something to fight. Monotony asks if you can endure. He questioned whether this path was making him colder, more distant, less emotional. But then he noticed something subtle. He wasn't numb. He was regulated. His reactions slowed. His responses became deliberate. He no longer felt the need to react to everything. Not every opinion deserved attention. Not every emotion required expression. That control wasn't suppression. It was maturity. Silence sharpened his perception. He started listening differently, not to reply, to understand. He noticed how people talked to avoid silence, how they filled space to avoid being seen, how few people were comfortable with pauses. He had become comfortable with them. That changed his presence. He didn't dominate conversations. He didn't disappear either. He spoke when it mattered. And when he did, his words carried weight. Not because they were loud, because they were considered. He also learned that solitude reveals dependency. Who you miss most is often who you relied on, not emotionally, psychologically. Approval, direction, identity. He saw how much of his identity was once reflected by others. Their reactions defined him. Now, without that mirror, he had to define himself. That was uncomfortable, because self-definition comes with responsibility. You can't blame misunderstanding when you've chosen silence. You can't blame rejection when you've chosen solitude. Ownership deepened. And with it, confidence began to form, not performative confidence. Quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. He stopped announcing his plans, stopped seeking validation before taking action. He understood that announcing goals often replaces commitment. Silence protected his intentions. It gave them space to grow without interference. There were still moments of doubt, moments where he wondered if he was wasting time, if life was passing him by while he chose discipline over enjoyment. But then he remembered, enjoyment without alignment eventually feels empty, and emptiness is louder than loneliness. The solitary path was not about rejecting people, it was about rebuilding himself without external scaffolding, learning to stand without leaning. That process was slow, painfully slow, but it was real, and reality compounds. Even when progress feels invisible, it accumulates. Silence had changed him, not by adding something new, by removing what didn't belong, and what remained was clearer, stronger, unshakable. There comes a moment on the solitary path when silence stops feeling like absence and starts feeling like space. Space to confront something unavoidable, the version of yourself that no longer fits. He didn't notice it all at once. It revealed itself in fragments, in reactions that no longer made sense, in desires that felt outdated, in habits that suddenly felt heavy. Things he once tolerated now drained him. Conversations that once entertained him now felt repetitive. Ambitions that once excited him now felt borrowed. And slowly, painfully, he understood. The old version of him was no longer compatible with who he was becoming. That realization didn't feel empowering. It felt like grief. Because identity is not just who you are, it's who you've been. Letting go of the old self meant letting go of familiarity, of predictable patterns, of known strengths, of practiced roles. He felt unanchored, not lost, between who he was and who he hadn't fully become. That in-between state is where most people panic. They rush to fill it, new labels, new beliefs, new personas, anything to avoid uncertainty. He didn't. He stayed there, uncomfortable, undefined, because rushing identity creates fragile structures. He allowed parts of himself to die, not dramatically, quietly. The need to be liked, the impulse to explain himself, the habit of reacting instead of choosing. Those didn't disappear overnight. They weakened through awareness, through restraint, through repetition. He noticed his emotional reactions losing intensity, not because he didn't feel, but because he didn't feed them. Emotion stopped controlling behavior. Choice took over. That shift changed his internal dialogue. The voice in his head became less chaotic, less defensive, less desperate. He stopped arguing with reality. Acceptance replaced resistance, and acceptance doesn't mean agreement. It means clarity. Clarity about what is. He saw his past differently now, not with shame, not with pride, with understanding. He saw how fear shaped his decisions, how comfort delayed growth, how approval distorted priorities. That understanding didn't excuse anything. It contextualized it, and context softened self-hatred. He forgave himself, not in a dramatic way, in a practical one, by not repeating the same patterns. That was real forgiveness. The death of the old self also changed how he saw others. He stopped judging them, not because he was above them, because he recognized himself in them at earlier stages, earlier fears, earlier limitations. That recognition created compassion, not superiority. He didn't feel the urge to correct people or convince them or awaken them. Awakening can't be transferred, it has to be experienced. Trying to pull others forward often slows your own growth. So he let people be, and that created peace. He also noticed a strange emptiness, not painful, neutral, as if something had been cleared but not yet replaced. That emptiness scared him briefly. Then he realized emptiness is necessary before something authentic can form. You can't build a new identity on top of an old one. It has to collapse first, and collapse feels like loss, but it creates space. In that space, values began to emerge naturally, not imposed, not inherited, chosen. He became more selective, with time, with energy, with attention. He stopped chasing intensity. He chose depth. He stopped craving excitement. He chose meaning. Those choices weren't loud. They didn't announce themselves. They simply guided behavior. The solitary path had done its work, not by making him extraordinary, by making him integrated, whole. He was no longer fragmented between who he was and who he pretended to be. That alignment brought calm, not happiness. Calm, and calm is stronger because it doesn't depend on conditions. The old self was gone, not erased, transformed, and transformation is irreversible. Once you see clearly, you cannot go back to distortion. You can only move forward, more honest, more deliberate, more real. After the old self dissolves, something unfamiliar appears. Not excitement, not confidence, stability, a calm that doesn't ask questions. He noticed it in the way he moved through days. There was no rush anymore, no urgency to prove progress, no anxiety about being left behind. Time felt different, not scarce, not abundant, intentional. He stopped filling his schedule just to feel productive. He chose fewer things and committed to them fully. That alone changed his results. Focus replaced effort, and focus is dangerous when paired with awareness, because now every action carried weight. He wasn't scattered, he wasn't reactive, he was deliberate. This is the stage most people misunderstand. They think awakening leads to ambition. It doesn't. It leads to discernment. He no longer chased opportunities. He evaluated alignment. Does this move me forward or sideways? Does this build depth or just noise? Those questions simplified life, but they also narrowed it. Many options disappeared, not because they weren't possible, because they weren't necessary. He became comfortable with fewer choices, and fewer choices create stronger direction. People began responding to him differently, not dramatically, subtly. They listened more, interrupted less, took his words seriously, not because he demanded respect, because he carried himself as if he respected his own time. That is quiet authority. Authority without force, without dominance, without explanation. He didn't announce standards, he embodied them. That presence came from something internal, consistency. He did what he said, even when no one was watching. He followed through, even when motivation was absent. That consistency built trust, not externally, internally. He trusted himself now, and self-trust changes posture, tone, decisions. You move slower, you speak less, you choose carefully. You don't react to chaos, you observe it. He realized something critical. The solitary path was never meant to be permanent. It was a refinement phase, a separation from noise before re-engaging with purpose. Now he was ready to re-enter the world, not to blend in, but to contribute. From clarity, he didn't feel the need to convince others. Influence wasn't his goal, integrity was, and integrity attracts naturally. He became selective with relationships, not out of arrogance, out of responsibility. Energy is finite. Attention is expensive. He invested both intentionally. He also understood that purpose doesn't arrive fully formed. It emerges through action, through testing, through adjustment, through commitment. Waiting for certainty is a trap. Certainty comes after movement. So he moved, quietly, without announcing a new identity, without dramatizing change, just consistent, aligned action, day after day. There were still doubts, still fatigue, still moments of resistance. Awakening doesn't remove struggle. It removes confusion about why you're struggling, and that makes all the difference. He knew now this path wouldn't make him admired by everyone. It wouldn't make life easy. It wouldn't guarantee outcomes, but it would guarantee one thing: he would not abandon himself again. That commitment was unbreakable, and from that commitment came a grounded sense of power. Not power over others, power over impulses, over fear, over distraction. That is real authority, quiet, internal, earned. The solitary path had shaped him, silence had sharpened him, the old self had dissolved, and what remained was someone capable of holding responsibility without resentment, someone who could stand alone without bitterness, someone who could engage the world without losing himself. This was not the end of awakening. It was the beginning of intentional living.